Some marriages don't end with a fight. They end with a USB drive sitting on the kitchen counter and a silence so loud you can hear your own heart deciding what to do next. My name is Marcus. I'm an architect. For 14 years, I designed buildings meant to last, structures with strong foundations, load-bearing walls, precise tolerances. I believed in things that were built to hold weight. My marriage, I thought, was one of those things. My wife's name is Claire. We met at a charity gala for a children's hospital where she was coordinating the event and I was one of the donors. She wore a dark green dress and laughed at her own jokes before she finished telling them. I fell in love with the laugh first. Everything else followed. We built a life the way most couples do. Slowly, then all at once. A house in suburban Columbus. 2 kids. Our son was 11. Our daughter was 8. A joint savings account we called the Forever Fund. Date nights on the 3rd Friday of every month. A dog named Bracket. My joke, she never found it funny, but she kept using the name anyway. I should have paid more attention to the things she stopped finding funny. The first sign came on a Tuesday in March, about 8 months before everything fell apart. I wasn't looking for anything. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't the suspicious husband who checked phones or questioned timelines. I was the husband who trusted so completely that I'd stopped paying attention, which, I've learned since, is its own kind of failure. I was reviewing our joint credit card statement that evening, not for any suspicious reason, but because we were refinancing the house and the bank needed documentation. I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the kitchen island, and scrolled through transactions on my laptop. Groceries, gas, the kids' orthodontist, a donation to the school. Normal. 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 Then, a hotel charge for $260 at a Marriott 12 miles from our house, on a Wednesday afternoon, in October. I stared at it for a long time. I told myself there was an explanation. Claire traveled occasionally for a marketing job at Meridian Healthcare. Maybe she'd had an off-site meeting. Maybe she'd booked a conference room. Maybe she'd been feeling unwell and needed to rest before a presentation. I didn't ask her about it that night. I don't know exactly why. Some part of me understood that once I asked the question, the answer, whatever it was, would become real. I waited, and I watched. Her name at work was Claire Hartwell Reed. She'd kept the hyphen from our marriage, which I used to think was a small, sweet gesture. Her affair partner worked at the same company. His name, I eventually learned, was Jordan, mid-30s, recently divorced, led the digital strategy team 2 floors above her office. I didn't learn his name right away. I learned it the way you learn things you didn't want to know, piece by piece, each fragment worse than the last. The second credit card charge appeared in November. Same hotel, different day. A Thursday this time. I found it while reconciling our expenses for Q4, something I did every year for tax purposes. This time, I didn't tell myself there was an explanation. I sat quietly for about 10 minutes. Then I closed the laptop, walked outside into the cold November air, and stood in the backyard until my hands went numb. Bracket followed me out and pressed against my leg. Dogs know things. I went back inside. The kids were doing homework at the dining table. My wife was on a work call upstairs, laughing at something someone said. I made the kids dinner. I helped with math homework. I read my daughter a chapter of her book. I said goodnight to both of them, kissed my wife on the cheek when she came downstairs, and told her I was going to bed early because I had an early site visit. I lay in the dark for 3 hours and thought about foundations. I thought about what happens to a building when the ground beneath it shifts. I thought about my children eating breakfast at that kitchen island every morning, unaware. I thought about the 14 years. I thought about the laugh and the green dress. Then I thought about what I was going to do. I am not a dramatic man. I don't yell. I don't make scenes. I solve problems methodically. It's what makes me good at my job. A structural failure is only catastrophic if you panic, if you stay calm, if you assess the damage accurately. If you understand exactly what has failed and why, you can almost always build something better in its place. I didn't hire a private investigator immediately. First, I needed to understand the scope of the problem. I needed to know whether I was looking at 2 charges or 20. I needed to know how long, how serious, and, most critically, what my legal and financial exposure looked like before I made any move. I called my college roommate who had become a family law attorney in Cincinnati. I told him I needed advice, off the record, for a friend. He understood what that meant. We met for lunch on a Friday, and I laid out what I knew. Document everything before you do anything, he told me. Bank accounts, investment accounts, retirement funds. Take stock of everything you have jointly and everything you have separately. Do it quietly. And Marcus, he paused here. Do not move money. Do not close accounts. Do not do anything that could look retaliatory. Just inventory. Just understand where you stand. I spent the following 2 weekends doing exactly that. I was meticulous. I photographed every document. I built a spreadsheet. I understood, for the first time with complete clarity, the precise dimensions of the life we had built together, and exactly what would happen to it if it came apart. Then I made one more call. A private investigator named Renata, recommended by my attorney. Former law enforcement, obsessively thorough, entirely discreet. Tell me what you need, she said. I need to know the truth, I told her. All of it. I need documentation that would hold up if this became a legal matter, and I need it done without my wife knowing anyone is looking. Give me 3 weeks, she said. Renata gave me everything in 22 days. The relationship had been going on for approximately 7 months. The hotel had been used 9 times. There were also 2 instances at his apartment, documented through vehicle tracking and timestamps. She had told her assistant she was working from home on 4 of those days. On 2 occasions, she had asked my mother-in-law to pick the kids up from school early, citing work emergencies. That last detail, the kids, my mother-in-law, the casual lie to cover an afternoon, was the one that took something out of me permanently. Not anger, exactly. Something quieter. A door closing in a house I'd lived in my whole life. Renata also handed me something I hadn't expected. A pattern of transfers. Small amounts, irregular intervals from our joint savings account to a personal account in Claire's name alone. None large enough to trigger concern on their own. Over 7 months. They totaled just under $18,000. I sat in my car in the parking garage of my office for 45 minutes after she handed me the folder. Then I drove to my attorney's office and handed him everything. Okay, he said, reviewing the documents carefully. Now we plan. Here's what I want people to understand about this part, the planning part. People hear revenge, and they imagine something hot, something explosive, something satisfying in the way that shouting is briefly satisfying. What I did wasn't that. It was cold. It was careful. It was the kind of thinking I do when I'm designing a building that has to withstand 40 years of weather and use. The goal was not to punish her. The goal was to protect my children and protect what we had built, the parts of it that were actually worth protecting. The goal was to make sure that when the ground shifted, the structure that remained was sound. My attorney advised me to initiate the divorce process strategically. Ohio is an equitable distribution state, which means assets are divided fairly, not necessarily equally. Documentation of financial misconduct, of dissipated marital assets matters. The $18,000 mattered. The timeline mattered. Everything Renata had given me mattered. We prepared a filing. We prepared a final disclosures. We prepared everything. And then I waited for the right moment. The moment came on a Saturday evening in early November, nearly 8 months after I'd first seen the hotel charge on that credit card statement. Claire had told me she was going to a work dinner, a client event, mandatory. She was sorry. Could I handle bedtime for the kids? I said, of course. I made the kids pasta. We watched a movie together on the couch. The 3 of us, brackets sprawled across our feet. I read to my daughter. I told my son a story about a bridge I'd designed that had survived a flood. I tucked them both in. Then I went downstairs and I set up the television in the living room. I'd asked my attorney whether what I was planning was appropriate, whether it was advisable. He thought about it for a moment and said, "It's not illegal. Whether it's wise depends on what you're trying to accomplish." I told him what I was trying to accomplish. He nodded slowly. On the television, on a loop on the HDMI input, I put a slideshow, not graphic. I want to be clear about that. What I put together was a series of photographs and documents, images from Renata's documentation, the hotel receipts, the bank transfer records, a simple timeline. Dated, sourced, irrefutable. It looked like a presentation because it was. The kind of presentation I would give a client to explain the state of a structure I'd been hired to assess. On the coffee table, I placed two things. The first was my wedding ring. I had taken it off that afternoon for the first time in 14 years. I set it there deliberately, facing the door. Beside it, I placed a small wooden box, the kind used for jewelry, hinge lid, nothing special. Inside the box was a USB drive containing the complete file Renata had given me, plus a single printed note from my attorney, a courtesy notification that divorce proceedings had been initiated that morning. I had moved out of our bedroom earlier that week, telling Claire I was having trouble sleeping and didn't want to disturb her. She hadn't questioned it. She'd looked briefly relieved, which told me something. I turned on the television. I turned on the slideshow. I sat in the armchair in the corner of the room, not dramatically, not theatrically, just quietly, and I waited. She came home at 11:14. I heard her key in the lock, heard her heels on the hardwood, heard her bag drop on the entryway bench the way it always did. Then there was a pause. The pause you get when something is wrong with the room you've walked into. When the light is wrong or the air is different, or the television is on when it shouldn't be. Marcus? I didn't answer. I let her walk forward. I let her see the screen. She stood in the entrance to the living room for a long time. I watched her look at the images. I watched the moment she understood what she was looking at. Her hand came up and covered her mouth, then dropped. Her breathing changed. She turned and saw me sitting in the chair. Marcus, don't, I said. My voice was calm. I'd had 8 months to get the calm. There's nothing to say right now. Everything that needs to be said is on that screen and in that box. She looked at the coffee table. She saw the ring. I watched something happen in her face. Not guilt, exactly, not yet. Something closer to the look a person gets when they've miscalculated badly and can see it clearly for the first time. She picked up the box. She opened it. She read the note. Her knees buckled. She caught herself on the arm of the couch and sat down heavily, the box still in her hands. She stared at the USB drive for what felt like a very long time. The kids, she started, are asleep upstairs, I said. And they're going to stay asleep because you're not going to make a scene. You're going to sit there, and when you're ready to have a real conversation, we can have one. But tonight is not that conversation. Tonight is just so you understand where things stand. She started to cry. I sat with it. I didn't comfort her and I didn't leave the room. I had said what needed to be said, and I had nothing left to perform. The divorce took 11 months. She contested elements of the financial claims at first. Her attorney challenged the admissibility of some of Renata's documentation, which my attorney had anticipated. In Ohio, evidence gathered without violating wiretapping statutes is generally permissible. Credit card records and bank statements are incontestable. The process was slow and expensive and deeply unpleasant, in the way that all legal processes involving people who once loved each other are unpleasant. In the end, the financial dissipation findings affected the asset division. I retained primary custody. My attorney had quietly laid that groundwork early, documenting my role as the children's primary caregiver, their schools, their medical history, their routines. Claire received standard parenting time. She retained her retirement account and a portion of the equity in the house. I got the house itself, which I'd designed significant renovations for, and which I intended to keep for the sake of the kids' stability. The $18,000 was factored into the settlement. She and Jordan did not stay together. I found that out not because I was watching, but because my son mentioned it offhandedly 3 months after the divorce was finalized. The way kids mention things, they assume you already know. I want to be honest about what came after, because I think people expect a particular kind of ending to stories like this. Either triumph or collapse, either the wronged party riding off into a sunset or crumbling permanently. What actually happened was neither, and I think neither is probably the most truthful thing I can offer you. There were mornings that first year when I woke up before the kids and made breakfast and felt something close to peace. The specific piece of a life that was smaller than before but entirely honest. The kids ate their cereal. Brackett begged for scraps. The morning light came through the kitchen window the same way it always had. There were also nights when I sat in the living room after the kids were asleep, and the quiet was the wrong kind of quiet. And I thought about the laugh in the green dress and felt something that didn't have a clean name. not grief for her. Exactly. Grief for the version of the story I had believed I was living. Grief for the 14 years read with a different understanding than I'd had while I was in them. My attorney, at the end of everything, said something I've thought about often. He said, "You handled this with more composure than most people are capable of." I appreciated the words, but composure isn't the same as wholeness. I was composed because I had to be, because there were 2 kids upstairs who needed their father to function. Composure is what you build over the wound. It's not the wound being gone. What I can tell you is this. My son is 12 now. He started asking me questions about my work, real questions, about load and stress, and why certain shapes are stronger than others. My daughter has decided she wants to be a veterinarian and has taken to narrating Brackett's emotions with clinical precision. Last week, she told me Brackett was experiencing mild existential uncertainty about his dinner bowl being moved. I laughed for a long time at that. It was a good laugh. Some structures can't be saved. When the foundation has failed, the most honest thing you can do is document the damage accurately. Preserve what's worth preserving, and build something new on ground you can trust. I'm still building. If this story reached you today, and you're sitting with something you don't quite have words for yet, something that feels like a hotel charge on a credit card statement, small and impossible to explain away, I want you to know that what comes after isn't the end of everything. It's just the end of the version of the story that was never entirely true. Take care of yourselves. If this meant something to you, leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if you know someone who needed to hear this today, share it with them. I'll see you in the next one.